Welcome to the Yacht Talk podcast. Today I'm here with Kate Murphy from Alliance Marine Risk Management, and we're going to be talking about yacht insurance. How are you, Kate?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, before we start the interview, I always like to ask people to talk a little bit about themselves. So, tell us a little bit of your background. How did you get into the marine industry? How did you get into insurance?
Well, I just kind of stumbled into it, to be honest with you. I moved down to Florida. I was always doing some sales before that in marketing. And at the time, this company called Crystal & Company took a chance on me. And I'm actually with the same group of people, so it's been almost 7 years now. Later, we've since merged our little department, our yacht division, and we're part of Alliance Marine. But it's the same people, so I've been with the same group of wonderful people for the last 6, almost 7 years.
Wow, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's dive into our questions.
Okay.
So first question, Kate. Why is it important for people to insure their yachts?
Well, first of all, yachts are not inexpensive. They're very expensive toys, and you want to protect your assets. So from a physical property damage, you want to have coverage on your yacht, but then more importantly, you also want to have the liability, because that's where it can get very costly. If you're liable for other things, hitting somebody else, or there's an injury on board the boat, these expenses can quickly add up. And if you don't have insurance, you're on the hook to pay those. Also, nowadays, marinas and shipyards are demanding that you have liability to go into a refit period. So if you're going to have work done on your boat, or even haul it out to do bottom painting or survey, you're not going to be able to get into the yards nowadays without having at least liability coverage in place.
And what about financing? I think insurance is important when someone is getting financing for their yacht.
Well, it's the same as if you're buying a house. You know, they want to make sure that if they're giving you a loan, they want to make sure that it's insured for their interest. So a lot of times finance companies will demand that, well, all of them demand that you have insurance, but they'll have certain requirements that the vessel be insured with only 2% whole deductible or lower. So those are things you have to consider if you're getting a loan.
Okay, cool. That's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
And now, because I've heard of people who have yachts and they don't get them insured because it's a lot of money and whatever, you know. And I understand the big risk that it involves. It's not a very responsible decision to make. But my question is, which percentage of yacht owners do actually make insurance claims every year?
I mean, that's a vague question, and that would probably be better answered by someone who handles the claim side of the business. But from what we can say, I guess a rough estimate would be that maybe you're looking at maybe 10%. But again, that's a question more for a claims person. That's a claims adjuster that would have more statistics on that. That works either with the carriers or industry hold that can gather that information for you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, because I'm thinking like some yacht owners that I know that haven't been very responsible and haven't gotten insured. Even Pete, who I work with, once told me a story of a yacht that like crashed into a house because the captain fell asleep, something like that, and the owner was not insured.
It's huge.
And I mean, it's not just paying for your yacht and for your cost of, you know, repairing everything you need to do, but also for third parties, right?
Correct. I mean, you're going to have to make that person whole with their home there. If there was any injuries, that could be huge. Pollution, you know, there's lots of things you have to consider with that can quickly add up, and there's a lot of different things that it can just make someone extremely financially in a bad situation.
Yeah, it's a big risk to take to go without insurance. Okay, next question. How is the cost of insurance calculated for a yacht? Always when I'm doing these interviews, we're thinking about 100-foot motor yacht. You know, that's what we always use for the example. So for a 100-foot motor yacht, how would you calculate the cost of an insurance policy?
Well, every underwriter rates differently, But the main things that they can look at is the age of the vessel. So obviously the older boats are weight heavier because there's more that could be go wrong with it versus a boat that's brand new. A lot of times their parts are even under warranty. So that's something to consider. Another thing is the owner's history, so their previous boating history. Do they have a lot of claims history? Do they not have any claims? These things are weighed into their decision when assessing a risk. Does the yacht have previous claims on it? So maybe it's a new owner, but the yacht had a huge lightning claim. That's something that they are going to have to take into account because they're insuring that vessel too. And they might inherit some hidden problems that weren't addressed with the previous owner. Other things they look at is the mooring location. So where's the boat going to be primarily moored? Where are they planning to navigate? Depending where you want to navigate will determine the rates, because if they're going to the Caribbean in the summertime, where then there's from June 1st to like November 1st, there's a lot of hurricane activity. So that's going to be weighed heavier than if they're up in the Hamptons or up in Newport, Rhode Island, where they're not going to have that activity, or it's less likely to have that activity. So those are things they consider when they're assessing a risk.
And how do you control, like if someone says, okay, during the summer I'm gonna be in Newport, but last minute change of plans, they decide to go to the Caribbean. I mean, is there any way for the insurance company to know?
Yeah, well, they have navigating limits on their policy. So it's the yacht owners and whoever they hire, so a captain, to be responsible for knowing what the navigating limits are in their policy. So when a coverage is bound, the first thing they want to know is, as an agent, I want to find out where's the boat going to be located, where are they planning to go for the year, for the annual term. And based on what they tell me, that's what the underwriter writes for the risk. And if they decide they want to change their navigating limits, that's fine, but you have to notify your agency first, your agent, and then they would go to the underwriter and let them know what their change of plans are. And then they would either be a surcharge if they're going into a higher risk area, or there might be a return premium if they're going in a lower risk area. So say they take the boat to the Lake Michigan, that's they don't have any hurricanes up there in the summer, so obviously they might see a credit.
Okay,
in a scenario like that.
And if they wouldn't advise the insurance company that they're going to change their location, then they might not be covered.
Correct.
Right,
and then it's no coverage.
Okay.
Because if the claim happened while they're outside their navigating limits, they are in breach of warranty, because it's stated in the policy that they have to be in that vicinity.
I understand. Okay, cool. Next question. Is there a limit to the year of a yacht for getting insurance?
The answer is no, but it becomes a lot harder to insure really older boats. Especially if they're like wooden in Florida, and they're from the 1920s or 1940s classics, stuff like that. That's a specialty niche market. There is people that do it, but it's you have to really, it becomes harder. So the short answer is no, there isn't a cap, but less markets are willing to write in certain areas, especially here in Florida, than if they were newer, because everyone wants the brand new boat because it's an easy risk to insure.
And is there like a year from which it will become harder? For example, if it's older than 2000, or if it's older than 2005, is there like approximately a year where you would say a boat that is newer than 2005 will get the insurance, but
that's a tricky one there. It depends on the underwriter. Each carrier works differently and what their appetite is, but if the boat is 12 years or newer, it seems everyone wants those, especially if they're over $2 million, and even in the smaller recreational marine boats that are under $2 million, if it's new to 12 years of age, those are usually really great insurable risks for them. So they tend to like those. It gets harder to place them after that, but not impossible. We have markets can do that, but with less markets, usually the rates are a little higher because they know it's kind of a last resort market and no one else wants it.
Yeah. So if someone is thinking about buying a yacht and they're trying to think, what the insurance is gonna cost, if they get a yacht that is 12 years older, if it's 12 years or newer, then they will probably get a better price on insurance, right?
It depends. I mean, there's other things too. Down here in Florida, everyone loves their quads engines, or at least their triples. So there's different appetites for each carrier. The rule, what I'd recommend doing is if you have someone that's looking at 2 different vessels and one's older than the other one, just go get a quote in advance. That way, and start as a yacht broker, I'd start the process a little earlier because if just to get them an idea of what to shop it out, because once they know that price in their head of what it's going to cost for insurance, and with understanding that what they can, once they're serious about their decision, they can shop it aggressively, but at least having that tentative quote there to know kind of what the value is, then they can work everything into their calculations about what the kind of boat they want to can afford realistically and maintain with all the everything included, including the insurance on the boat.
Yes, that's very
or the
good
yacht,
advice.
I should say.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. How much does insurance go up if someone is in Florida during hurricane season?
Again, I have to, everything is based on what the carriers, what their underwriting guidelines are, and unfortunately, as an agent, they don't share them all with you, but we shop it out aggressively to all the available markets. I just did one recently. Now, this was a sailboat, recreational marine, smaller division there, not under the 2 mil. And there was, just this past week, we saw about a third reduction by having the boat up, going to Newport. But then it was staying in Newport. So it became, yes, the owner was buying the boat in Florida, but his plan was to bring it up to Newport after July 1st. It'd be up there. And then it would remain and then be winterized. So that there was a huge savings on that. But people don't always want to be up there in the cold weather because you can't use the boat year round.
Yeah.
So I always say, plan what you want to do, because this is a fun hobby, if you will. And the owners, whatever they want, we can get accomplished for them. Just get the quotes in advance, and then they know.
Of course, you don't want to make the decisions of where you're gonna be traveling and the adventures you want to have on your yacht based on the insurance costs, right?
Then there's always going to be a market that's out there that they can place coverage for the owners. So don't let that deter you, because you can save a lot of money, but if you're not using your boat, then what's the point? Yeah, exactly. You want to be able to enjoy it, and you do it year round. So you're down here in the Caribbean, Florida, it's great.
Yes, and anyways, many people like to go up to Newport and the Northeast for the summer because it's too hot here, anyways. So in that case, that would work better for their insurance costs, anyways, right?
Right, and not only that, the premium might go down, but how much is the fuel to get up there? So you gotta, or to winterize the boat and put it on the hard or whatever. So these are things that, is it really cost savings? It just depends on the individual and what they've arranged. So do it. The bottom line is do what you want to do. Just tell your agency in advance what your plan is, and then they'll shop accordingly.
Of course. And do you get a better price if you do it in advance than if you just call it, say, 1 month before and say,
no? Well, usually quotes are only good for 30 days.
Okay.
And then, no, you just want to, but if you don't wait till the last second, because if you wait you got to give the underwriters and the chance to quote insurance. And the more time you give the agency to shop it out, the more markets they will have available to you to wait for the quotes to come back. But if you wait for that last second then you're rushing to get to the market, get one, and then just to get something in place to bind for the closing the next day. But they have more time to shop if you give them 2 weeks or so to do it.
Okay, so 2 weeks is enough time?
Yeah, once
Okay.
you're under contract, make sure, I mean, if you on the fence, if you want to see what coverage would be because of that, like let's say the older boat scenario that we just mentioned, that is my vessel this age or this versus one, what would the premium be? You can always get that tentative quote in advance, but when you're serious about and under contract, that's when you should start definitely shopping right away.
Okay.
And make sure you have it, especially if you're getting a loan on the boat. You're gonna need to have that figured out in advance because you can't close. They want to make sure you have insurance in place.
Yes.
So the earlier you do it, the smoother the transition will be for everyone involved.
Great. Okay. Next question. If a hurricane is approaching, what are the owner's responsibilities?
To follow your hurricane plan to the best of your ability. Every carrier requires that you fill out a hurricane plan if you're going to be down here or where places are more hurricane prone, so the Gulf Coast, the Bahamas, the Caribbean, even the Carolinas now, in Georgia. But try and follow your hurricane plan. If you can't follow it, email your agency or call them. I prefer email because then you have a writing trail, but definitely call them and let them know what your alternative plan is. As long as you stay within your navigating limits, most policies are designed where they don't warrant that you have to follow your hurricane plan. They just want to know you have one.
Okay.
So as long as you stay within your navigating limits and then trying your best to secure the vessel and then tell your agency, who then will inform the underwriter of your new plan, then you're good. That's what you have insurance for, is for sudden and accidental things that you can't control, and Mother Nature's one of them. But what they really want you to do is stay safe. So obviously once you secure the boat, they don't want you out there in the elements trying to weather the bad weather, because now they'll have a damage on a yacht and potentially injury or loss of life. So they want you to stay safe. So get the boat, get the vessel secured, and then get to safety.
And what is a hurricane plan? For example, like what kind of things go in a hurricane plan?
Okay, so for the larger vessels, they usually have a captain, a dedicated captain, that his sole her sole responsibility is to secure that one vessel. They want to see that they're tying down anything that could be blow away, removing them, finding a safe berth or harbor or bay where it's a hurricane hole, if you will, that they can anchor down. Double lines, chafe gear. There was a really nice presentation done a while back by Towboat where they were showing that in the seawall itself, the rope lines had sawed like a knife about this far into the actual concrete wall, just from the friction of going back and forth. So if you have chafe gear on the thick ropes, then it will protect the ropes from snapping. So these are just little things the owners can do, or the captain who represents the owner. But the captains are trained to do this, their crew. They know how to secure down everything that could fly away, and just do your best. And be in touch with the neighbors. If you see another neighbor's boat that is not, maybe they're absentee, which is the worst fear of an underwriter, then if their boat doesn't look secure, go over there and try and secure it so that it's not going to cause a domino effect, because if one vessel, one yacht is not secured correctly, it could do a lot of damage, which we've seen from the last few hurricanes we've had in the past since 2017.
Of course. Okay, cool. That's very useful information. Now, are there other factors that could make insurance prices go up or down?
From the ones I've already discussed?
Yes, I mean, we talked about the year, we talked about the history of the boat and the owner, right?
High performance vessels, it's a new trend. Well, it's not new, but it's more common now to see triple and quad engines down here in Florida with all the boats that we have, and just that's the new market niche. And they do poker runs and stuff in Key West, and those are built boats, but it's convincing. The underwriters get nervous when it's high performance and go fast speeds. So there's less markets willing to offer that. Not impossible, but they're also now they have aggregates where they can only have X amount of risk in certain zip codes. So once they reach a certain dollar amount, they're told to stop writing in that, because from an underwriter's perspective, they don't want too many eggs in one basket in an area, because those for instance, the fleets, the charter fleets that they had, down in the Caribbean, one hurricane can wipe out an entire fleet, and they're on the hook for all of those vessels to be. So that's a huge loss for the underwriter. So they have aggregates they need to meet. So that becomes trickier too. That's things that can affect the rate and also placement, because there might be a really good program, but they might have not reached their capacity. So, and things like that, you just have to play around and be like, well, do you want to moor your boat? Maybe this go a little further away, but now we have that better product here. So, but you just have to keep there. It just depends, it's what we're here for, to help you out.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
It is, yeah.
Yes. Okay, now, what makes one insurance company different from another?
Well, as far as, you mean the agency side or the underwriters?
The agency side.
Okay, so from the agency side, it's how knowledgeable they are about the different markets that are available in their market niche, and my market niche is what we can do worldwide, but we have the majority of our boaters here in Florida, where I'm based. So you want somebody that is knowledgeable, that cares, that is looking out for your best interest, that takes the time to go over the coverages if you have questions. These are things that you can stand out. So it's more customer service and understanding what the marketplace is doing, so that you can keep your clients abreast of current events and what can help them and add value to them, and understanding things about hurricane preparation and stuff like that. So that's where it'd be differentiate.
Yes, so it's mostly about customer services, right? Like the relationship with the client and the personalized attention. Right,
because at the end of the day, when you have a claim, you want to know that you're taken care of, or someone cares and they're your advocate, and they work between the carrier and yourself to resolve the matter.
Yeah, that that they're gonna answer the phone, right?
Right.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, next question. Do yacht owners require a recent survey to get their yachts insured?
Yes, I mean, if it's brand new or close to being brand new, then you don't need a survey. But after it's gets to a certain age, and it depends on the carrier, but usually when you're buying a new yacht, you're going to want to have a survey done. I don't care if it's that new. I highly recommend that you do, just because in 3 years' time, someone can neglect a vessel and it can quickly deteriorate, or they could have a hidden claim that they're not telling you about, and it's just in your best interest to know what you're up against. So definitely you want to add a water survey. Sometimes they'll consider it in a water survey, but with a dive inspection report, but it's just best to get it out of water survey. And then depending on the carrier, they'll determine how many years go by before they require a new one. So if you're with the same carrier for a while, you might have more leniency than if you start price shopping every few years, whatever. They obviously, if you're going with a new carrier, if the vessel's now older and they don't have a current survey, they're going to require it before they will shop it, because they just want to know what they're up against.
So if someone already has a boat, a yacht, for a few years and just wants to change insurance company, they might need to get a survey for the insurance?
I mean, the first thing I would do is ask them for their existing one, and then we could submit that up, and then depending on the underwriter, they'll say, okay, that's fine, or no, they want a new one done.
Okay.
They are looking for, things they're looking for is, at least they're not accepting a lot nowadays, vessels surveys. It's very rare that they'll accept below average. So it has to have average condition status or above average or excellent. Those are the things that they're looking for. They get like with most people, if you have a lot of survey recommendations and a to-do list there that's extremely long, then that's a red flag for them. So you want to make sure that you have a good survey, and the yacht owners should probably want that too. I think you want to invest a whole slew of hidden problems. You want to have a good vessel to be able to operate right away.
Yeah, definitely.
Enjoy.
Definitely. Okay. Now, I think this is what we talked briefly, but what kind of survey deficiencies need to be addressed before coverage is given?
If it's from the carrier's perspective, they'll say all of them, because they want to make sure that but really it's the safety ones first. So usually the survey will have categories. They usually have safety recommendations that are asterisked. Those are the most important because they want to make sure it's seaworthy. Obviously they're not going to insure a vessel that isn't seaworthy. And then we know that the surveyor puts everything in there just because they're doing their due diligence for the buyer, possibly new owner, to point out every nick that's on the boat. That's more cosmetic. But from the surveyor's point of view, from an underwriter's point of view, they just say, well, we want everything. So there's ways you can say, usually if the safety ones, depending on the condition of the survey, if it comes back above average or excellent, then there's usually not that many survey recommendations. They're very manageable. As long as they get the safety ones done and they have a timeline of how they're going to address the other ones throughout the remaining policy term, they will be okay with it. But if it has a lot of recommendations, they're going to want to see that they immediately get addressed. And we're seeing now that they're putting back the burden back onto the seller, because they won't find coverage or put it as port risk until the whole list is completed, which is not something that a buyer wants to take on. So, or they might have, if they have a loan, they can't do port risk. So it's now we're seeing it go back to put the burden back onto the seller to get the boat or the yacht up to par, so they can get the closing done for the new owner. Where in the past you had X amount of days to do it. There's not, some carriers are still doing it, but we have seen all of a sudden them requiring that they be addressed before they purchase the vessel and get insurance. Where in the past, like a home, you had 30 days to get your repairs done, and now we're seeing a couple of them not do that anymore.
That's interesting because when I was interviewing Peter Lenton just recently about buying a yacht, we were talking about surveys, and we were talking about, is it better for the seller to fix whatever needs to be done or the buyer? And what we concluded is that if the seller fixes something right before selling their yacht, they're gonna do it the least expensive way, right? They're gonna do it like the minimum necessary just to pass the test.
Right.
But if the buyer does it, they're gonna really put more money and effort into getting it done properly. So it's interesting that someone might not be able to buy a vessel until certain things are fixed.
If they have a loan, a bank loan, that says that because banks, they'll demand that it be seaworthy. They're not gonna, so if it's port risk, it's not moving, they can't operate it, they don't want it, they won't accept it, they won't get a loan on it. But if they don't have a loan, and they don't mind being at port risk to get the things accomplished, but they usually want it to be done within a 30-day period, or if certain things might take a little longer, so they have a letter survey recommendation form that they have to, each carrier has the form, and it tells the timeline of when things will be completed. As long as they're reasonable time frames, usually the underwriter will work with you and say, okay, we can work with that. But they're not going to want to say, hey, I'll get to it, in 8 months. No, because then they've already invested 8 months of a 12-month period term. They're going to say no. They want to make sure it's done relatively quickly. Yeah, especially what you were talking about, safety. Those issues, right away. Right? They won't remove the port risk for that until those are seaworthy, and safety complied with U.S. Coast Guard regulations.
I can understand that,
Mm-hmm.
of course. Okay, next question. What do you require for owner-operator insurance?
Okay, so, we get that a lot, especially down here. So to get owner-operator, I always say the rule of thumb is to stay within 10 feet jump in size from the previous boat you've owned.
Okay.
Or operated, but really owned is the better. So if you've operated and owned a 40-foot vessel and you're jumping to a 65, that is most underwriters are gonna red flag that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was a 50, okay. Or if it was 45, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
So because they're like, that's a gradual jump in size. But when you get higher up there, all of a sudden you start jumping. They want to see the experience that you've owned and operated boats at that size before. They're also going to want to see a really great resume. So they want to see things on your resume are the waters that you navigated, because you can say, hey, I've operated a 60-foot vessel before, but it was in the Great Lakes. Mm-hmm. You're like, well, that's a lot different from the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. And that's where if they want to have their new yacht and be able to operate in the Bahamas, they're going to say, well, you've never operated in the waters that you're planning to be moored and navigate. So no. So things to think about are a great resume. If they have a captain's license or a six-pack license or a 100-ton, feature that on the resume form. Most agencies have their standard resume form that you fill out. It's yes, there's questions and you just fill them out. So waters navigated, showcase that. Vessels that you've owned or operated. If you want to, sometimes you might be on the cusp there, say you have that 40-foot that you've owned for 20 years or, and you've been a experienced boater, you've gradually jumped up from starting in the, in that 16-foot little boat in the lakes as a kid to now owning a 40-foot that you've loved and cared for 20 years, but now you want that nice sports fish that's like a 65, but you need to bridge, or 55, let's just say 55, that's more reasonable. 55, then you don't, it's a 15-foot gap, but let's just say that you've been practicing on your friends, gone on multiple fishing trips on a 50-foot or a 52-foot. Now you put that in there, and it's not just, I did it once and I took that. No, we've been on this boat for the last 4 years. I've taken the helm, I've been operating this. We've gone on multiple voyages together and taken shifts. Then that is all taken into consideration. It's easier time. The other thing you can do is, if you're on that cusp there where they just don't feel comfortable with your ability to operate on your own because of the jump in size, what they can do is hire a part-time captain initially to train them on their new vessel for a period of time in the waters where they're going to be primarily operating or navigating, and then that captain can fill out a letter of recommendation after an extended period of time getting sea time, and they can log the hours in of where they've been, what they've practiced, and if the captain feels comfortable with their ability, he can write a letter of recommendation, and we can submit that to the underwriter for their review. And if it's everything shows correctly, and they feel it'll make better chances of them getting approved. Now, for vessels that are over 65 feet, it becomes harder to get owner-operator approved. Not impossible, but harder. Especially after all the hurricane activity and stuff, they're under pressure to write good risk. So the underwriting guidelines have gotten stricter. So as long as they have a good resume, great boating history showing that they've gradually jumped up in size in vessels, and no claims history, they are more likely to get approved.
Okay, under 65 feet, right?
That's a rule. Yeah, I mean it's not a soft rule. I'd say it's not rule of thumb. It's not that's it.
Yeah.
And we have gotten people approved up to 100 foot, but they had a 100-ton license. They were operating boats, that were of that size before. So
it's difficult though, right?
It's more difficult.
Yeah.
Not impossible.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So anything, and we're always willing to try.
Okay,
Hmm.
cool. Now, are there any yachts that can't get insurance?
Ones that are not seaworthy.
Yeah.
If it's scraps and it's gonna, they can get insurance, but it would be like, it wouldn't be for a typical hull and machinery and P&I policy. That's a builder's risk or something like that.
Okay.
It becomes more difficult if they have, like say they were in a pending claim, that's a large, sizable claim, and then they let their coverage lapse. It's gonna be hard to find a carrier that will want to take it on because it's a pending claim,
Okay.
and they didn't renew their policies, and they'll be in a pickle in that situation. But most of the time, you can get coverage.
Okay.
Hmm.
Will yacht insurance cover the yacht wherever it's cruising, or is it limited to a certain geographical area?
That goes back to what we were talking about with the navigating limits. Each policy has defined what their navigating limits are on the policy. Usually it's on the deck page, or has note of it in the actual policy itself outlining their navigating limits. Some are broader than others. It's usually on it's based on what the owner tells the agent at the time, and hence the underwriter, of where they plan to navigate for the annual term. Now, if they want to change that, then they would just need to call in advance or send an email to their agent, notify them, and then they would tell the new plan of where they plan to go, and then they would get a new rate, or it might be a surcharge or a credit depending on where they plan to go.
Okay.
Some yachts, some of our mega yachts, they are worldwide coverage. Of course, there's some hot spots that are do not go areas, like off the coast of Somalia, or but that's for political reasons and safety, more than
more than hurricanes, right?
That's just that's what common sense. They wouldn't want to, because if the government seizes their boat over there, the chances are of them getting back is zilch. So
of course
they want to protect their risk.
Okay, so generally people can insure their yachts to go pretty much anywhere in the world without a problem.
Correct. And then, what we typically do is in all agencies, they're pretty much the same. Upon renewal, that's the time we check in with our owners, and we send out renewal questionnaires. And one of the questions on there is, where do you plan to navigate? Because a lot of times it slips their mind, that they forgot to tell you that, hey, we're thinking going here, and the last thing you want is to be in breach of warranty if you're navigating limits, because if you did have a huge claim and you're not where you're supposed to be, it's null and void there. You're not going to get any coverage.
That's a big problem.
You weren't where you're supposed to be. But as long as you tell them in advance, and
cool,
you can get taken care of.
Okay, next question. If a yacht owner has a claim, will the cost of their policy automatically go up?
Depends, not necessarily. So, for instance, if you have a run out of gas and break down or somewhere and you need to get a tow, that's weighed differently than if you had a lightning claim. So if you just had a towing, it's technically a claim, but it doesn't get marked necessarily against you as it would like a lightning claim. So in that case, they might not increase it. But if you had a substantial lightning claim and there was a lot of electrical damage and electronics had to be replaced, they are on the hook for a large sum of money. You can expect an increase in premium, but it'll be gradual. It won't be like necessarily a huge sticker shock. Unless it's massive.
And the increase in premium is because there might be more problems coming up after that claim?
Well, they have to recoup their cost on you as an investment too. I mean, we're not a non-profit. We run, it's a for-profit industry, so they already lost money on you because they took the chance that they're insuring risk, and that's what you have insurance for, is for sudden accidental. But when they do have a hit on there, usually it's a huge hit, and therefore they have to recoup a little bit. So they're going to increase the premium, but it won't be huge amounts. Like they'll do it over a period of time, assuming that you'll be loyal to them, continue staying with them since they made you whole after a claim.
Yes. Okay, that sounds fair. Okay, next question. Is the carrier's decision based in any way on who the yacht was built by?
Yes, and it depends on each carrier has their own boats they like and ones they don't. And it's usually on how many had claims in the past. So brands that are well respected in the industry, that have longevity, that have been around for a long period of time, they know there's a history on them and they can look at the claims history. They know that they're going to be solid vessels and well made. They're going to be okay with insuring them. Ones that are newer brands that are entering the marketplace, they might not have as many underwriters. So underwriters are going to be cautious about them because they don't know whether it's going to be like the Titanic sink, you know what I mean? So they will do their research ahead of time, especially if it's not been in the marketplace for a while. They'll look at it, and then if they think it's a sound risk, then they'll insure it. Some other underwriters are more cautious than others, so they'll wait and let others test it out first, and then if they, after a few years in the marketplace, if they haven't shown any large claims on the vessels for functionality and stuff like that, then they'll say okay, and they'll dip their toes in and also start insuring them.
Okay, that sounds good. And if someone's yacht is total loss, would that owner be able to get insurance for the next yacht that they buy?
It depends. It depends on their previous claim history. So if they've had multiple large claims, it becomes a lot more difficult. Even if they have, mega yachts and stuff, if they have substantial claims and they have over in the last 5-10 years, it's kind of like, they're going to look at, like I said, the owner and their claims history as well as the new yacht. So it weighs against them, but most they can be insured again.
I mean, if it's one time, I guess it's different, right?
Yes, if they had been a boater for 20 years and they've had no claims, and all of a sudden Hurricane Irma hits and they have a total loss scenario, and they did everything in their power to secure the boat and and keep it safe, and just Mother Nature decided that wasn't going to be their day, then they'll get insurance elsewhere.
Okay.
They take that into consideration. But if someone has constant record of claims and they're different things, then they start getting a little wary, because then it looks more like, could they have done different things, or to prevent the claim.
Yes, I understand. So they're looking for responsible owners, right, to insure.
Right.
They want to make sure that they're doing the right things to prevent claims.
Right.
Of course. Okay. When insuring a yacht, are the engines and generators also insured?
Yes.
Okay. And what about the tender?
The tender is insured. You just have to notify the carrier. Like the mega yachts, a lot of them have built-in language into the policy that gives them X amount of dollars for having a tender, even if they don't schedule it, and let them know if they forget to, say the captain buys a new tender for the owner and they forget to tell the carrier that they switched the tenders. There's usually, first they have newly acquired yacht coverage on there for 30 days, but then they also have some, for tenders, they have a little bit of coverage in place for the larger yacht policies. And then if the vessel is kept, say it's a dinghy tender, or it's inflatable, 12 foot, or inflatable dinghy there, they a lot of times they'll cover them if they're carried on board the vessel. But for the smaller recreational policies, some of them, they want to know, have to schedule it, or there's no coverage for the tender. So those are things that you always just want to make sure to let your agent know. If you have tenders or personal watercraft, any toys, let them know in advance, because they'll want to schedule them on for your policy or make sure they're covered.
Of course. Yeah, some tenders can be worth a lot of money.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's important to have them insured. And what about the jet skis?
Jet skis, same thing. The the personal watercraft, they're carried on board the vessel. On the larger policies, they're covered usually right automatically, but they want to know the make and model just in case you ever, some have it where they schedule them onto the policy, some just you notify the carrier, but you don't see it on the policy, just that's included. If they're up to, but jet skis can become interesting if they're not carried on board, and if they're not used, if they're used independently of the main vessel. So say that the owner has a son or a daughter that keeps the jet skis at their little house, but it's not where the main vessel is kept. Like maybe the main vessel is kept in the Bahamas and the jet ski is separate somewhere else. Now they don't like that scenario. So what they'll do is recommend you might have to get like a separate jet ski policy, and like Progressives of something like that. Progressive can easily write a jet ski, and they'll have a small standalone policy for that if they're keeping it independent from the main vessel. But if it's being kept with the main vessel, yes, it's being covered.
Okay. And what is not covered by a yacht insurance policy?
Well, it depends on the policy, but that's a hard one to answer. But I can just give you a few examples of, like, for each policy is broken down. What you have the property damage section of the policy, and then you have the liability. So for an example for liability, if you intentionally, it's an intentional act, like you did something to deliberately cause a liability claim, then it's not going to be covered.
Of course.
So that's like an example of that, and that's like in every single policy.
Yeah.
If for like property damage to the hull, things that they don't typically cover are things that you should have been doing as maintenance, so wear and tear, mold, gradual deterioration. Insurance policies are set, they're not for maintenance,
No,
they're there
of
for
course.
sudden and accidental reasons that aren't beyond your control. So you can't just be like, oh, this is becoming obsolete, I want it replaced. I'm going to just file a claim. No, it doesn't work that way. So those are things that you would typically see that on most policies, or all policies that I've seen, that are not covered. And then, but the other ones are. So those are the actual parts, that are not covered. If they cause, if those wear and tear items are a cause of a greater claim that happens, then they won't cover it for that part, but they'll cover it for the consequential damage.
Okay.
So those, you know what I mean? So there's things like that.
Okay.
But it depends on the claim itself and how the policy is written.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Which things should I take into consideration when deciding on my deductible?
Well, it's just basically up to, banks will, if you have a bank loan, it's determined by the bank. So the bank will requirements. I have seen them do like 5% before on higher performance vessels, but typically on a standard bank loan, they want to see no greater than a 2% whole deductible. So they want to see 2% or less.
Okay.
If you don't have to deal with the financing on the banks, then it's up to basically your personal preference. The higher the deductible, the lower the premium is, but is it worth it? So you have to calculate that. Are you a gambling person? Like, for a 100-foot yacht, that 3% deductible can be extremely high on your wallet versus like if it's only a 100K recreational boat, that's maybe you're like, oh, 3% is only $3,000, not that big of a deal. I can take that hit if I had and have the lower premium. So it's really just up to the individual owner's preference.
Yeah. Okay. And which tips could you give a yacht owner to reduce the cost of their insurance?
Stay claims free.
Yes.
A lot of them have continuity bonuses on the mega yachts, where if they're rewarded for not having a claim upon renewal, so they can see things like go down, whether it be their whole deductible or their premium. So those are things that can help. Just follow good safety boating practices. Maintain your vessel. Don't let it go into disrepair. But yeah, those are That's probably it.
Yeah, be a responsible person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate.
Yeah,
Now,
thank-
if anyone wants to contact you for questions about insurance or
Sure.
to get help with an insurance policy, what is the best way to reach you?
They can give me a call. My direct line is 954-289-6052, or they can shoot me an email. And do you want me to say the email too? It's kind of long.
No, I'll put it on the episode notes.
All right, perfect.
So I'll put Kate's email in the episode notes. I'll also put the website for your
Okay.
company. So if anyone wants to call Kate, she'll be happy to help you.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Hope I helped you out.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.